Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, a look inside our evil domain at the Independence Institute, how we exploit the youngins. But first, money supply, and don't get scared, but a Bitcoin-y thing. Don't worry. From the Independence Institute, Justin Longo, who introduced me to this bizarre concept a couple years ago, and now I'm hooked. Bob Berry, who is a Bitcoin consultant. I have no idea what the hell that means.
That isn't exactly my day job.
Right. I tell you what, before we get all cryptocurrency and scare people, let me ask you, what is the problem with money? I mean, we carry money, we have Visa cards, we have checking accounts. We have a natural feel that if we're going to buy something, you know, what it's worth, and they say this many dollars, it gives us a sense of that's the same as X amount of work or this and that. We have a feel for what a dollar is, which is why when you go to another country and they hand you this funny money, it's like, this means nothing to me. It has no feel. What is money? What's the problem with money?
So, you know, really it's a good place to start because we think we're dealing in money when we handle these funny little notes that are made on paper. But what we're really dealing with is currency. And currency used to be like a deposit receipt. You'd take some gold and you'd put it in a depository. And instead of having to withdraw it all the time to make physical gold settlements, we got these little pieces of paper. And so I would trade you my receipt, and you could just as easily go down to the repository and claim your amount of gold. And that system survived in some fashion up until the early 1970s.
And that, I mean, the Bank of England really did this, which was, you know, a pound sterling. I don't know if it had anything to do with an actual physical pound, but the idea was you could go back to the Bank of England and go, here's my 20-pound note or something, and they will give you an ounce of gold or whatever it was. And so instead of carrying my gold, I could just say, here's the claim check. It was like your laundry check. Here, you know, here's my laundry check, and I can get yours. Is that kind of what it was?
And it was, and this is a great learning opportunity because what we learned very quickly in that system is that governments can't be trusted. They just can't be trusted. They will lie, and what they will do is, I think Milton Friedman once said that it's kind of like your coat check at a restaurant. The Federal Reserve thinks that by printing more receipts for coats, that they can magically grow more coats.
All right. So what is the problem with currency? If this piece of paper is worth an ounce of gold, and I can split this piece of paper up and get two half pieces of paper, and you and I can switch these instead of switching gold. Cool. Currency is good.
How it used to be, the supply of money, which was physical silver and gold, was constrained by the physical supply of gold and silver. Now there is no constraint on the supply of money. As he said, the Federal Reserve prints money at will. So the value of the dollars we're holding are constantly being devalued based on an increasing supply amount of money that the Federal Reserve is printing.
What people might not get is that there's a demand for more money, that if we kept money constricted to how much gold we had or whatever commodity you want to tie it to, so there's only this much commodity, well, there's going to be this many dollars or whatever, drachma, whatever the hell you want. The problem is that people are doing business. I want to build a building. I want to start a business. I want to do these things. I need more of this. And so loan me more of this. And so there's this pressure to try to get more money. If you have to get more gold, if you have to get more currency, if it's more beans, whatever it is, you actually have to go out there and get more beans. That happens slowly. The Fed can keep the economy burning faster by just saying, all right, yeah, we have this much, but let's make this much paper instead. Is that a pretty good way to put it?
That's the theory, but in practice, when you do that, the government is playing favorites because the people who get to spend the newly created money that wasn't earned, but it was, and I should be careful, I don't want to really call it money, I want to stick with calling it currency. The people who get to spend that first get to spend it at its value before it has diluted the value of the rest of the currency pool. So mom and dad end up getting diluted, weaker dollars, okay, but the Wall Street bankers get very potent dollars we call hot money, and it often goes right into stocks, and so it causes all these problems because it hasn't depreciated yet in value.
That's right.
So
it's just been minted. It's just been printed right
there. So
I have
let's say I had a Coca-Cola here, and I put a bunch of ice in there, and it's a hot day. What's going to happen? It's going to dilute my Coca-Cola. All that, that's what's going to happen, and that's the image to think of when you're thinking of currency. You're not creating any new value when you're creating currency. You're not creating any value. Markets can't be fooled. Markets understand.
There's still the same amount of stuff in your economy.
Right.
You've just put more money to represent the amount of stuff.
And it's very, very convenient for governments to play this game because then they can pick winners and losers. Then they could be the people dealing out all the money, and it boosts their power. And this is the fundamental. To answer your question, this is the fundamental problem that we're dealing with.
All right, and what's fascinating, I never really thought about this before, but before governments started playing that game of creating currency. Fake money, out of thin air, with nothing to back it up. When you had a dollar, it actually grew in buying strength because the demand, as I said, businesses kept needing this. So when people would save their money, and I got $1,000, well, a couple of years later, that $1,000 could buy so much more, and I didn't do anything. The dollar got stronger. But now, because we keep inflating what's called the money supply, the currency supply, it buys less and less. So now we're at a system, and let's get to the punchline. We have now twice as many dollars in the economy as we did 8 years ago, which means everything should cost twice as much. It doesn't yet. At some point it might, but the Fed just keeps building more and more.
Right. With every new dollar created, the purchasing power of your existing dollar goes down. You could buy less stuff with it, correct?
All right. So what we really need is a market currency, kind of like gold was and silver was for the longest of time. And so
because you can't inflate gold,
you can't inflate gold.
You can go mine it and find some more bit by bit, but you can't inflate it.
And that's the fundamental thing. Markets are better at handling a money system than governments are. And it's kind of funny because 200 years ago it was rather controversial to say, well, we probably ought to have government out of religion, and we probably ought to have government out of deciding what we are allowed to talk about. Okay? But for some reason, the one enduring thing that we kind of definitely know by now is government really shouldn't have a place in dealing with money either.
All right, then let's jump into that. That's the history lesson. Then let me run this idea by you. Since dollars are not connected to anything, and they keep getting inflated, and so they're going to become worthless. We see the Zimbabwe dollar, not worthless, they'll never be worthless, but the Zimbabwe dollars of hyperinflation. We don't want that. Wouldn't it be great? Let me just run this idea by you. If we had a currency that was limited, it doesn't have to be. If dollars simply weren't inflated, that actually would be a really cool thing. Say, this is the amount of money we have. We can only add a little bit every year, and that's it. If we had that with no quantitative easing or any sort of other manipulation, it doesn't actually need to be connected to gold. The key is to have a money supply that's limited. How about if I come up with a money supply that cannot, no matter what, be inflated? Would that solve your problem for you?
You just created Bitcoin.
You did. You're Satoshi.
No, I'm a genius man. All right, explain it as best you can. And that most of our money now is digital anyway. I mean, you carry a little spending cash, but it's your credit card and now online banking. You never hold your dollars. So Bitcoin does what?
Think of Bitcoin as the internet of money. So what Bitcoin is a program that allows 21 million Bitcoin ever to be created. That's it. It's a cap at 21 million.
So if Bitcoin was being run by the Fed, there'd be a constraint saying, no matter what happens, Fed, you can only make $21 million. That's it. You can't do any more. How many Bitcoins are out in the world now?
I think 13, 14 million now.
Yeah, something like that.
I thought, okay,
so, yeah.
All right. So, and so every year the amount can grow.
It does grow.
Almost like mining gold. The more the Feds could buy new gold, the more dollars they could make back when it was restricted to this. But the key of Bitcoin is it can never be inflated. Is that
centrally manipulated? I would say yes. There is new Bitcoin being put into the system every 10 minutes, but once the total amount hits 21 million, that's the end of it. So it can't be inflated beyond 21 million. So the way I like to think about this is the problem that Bitcoin solved was a problem of having scarcity in the digital world. Prior to Bitcoin's blockchain technology, and look up blockchain technology, there was no way to prevent copying and pasting on the internet in the digital world. If I send you $1, I could copy and paste that same dollar
in the
to
same
Bob.
way. In the same way, I send you a beautiful photograph of me.
Right.
You could then create a million photographs of me, and there's no value to it.
So,
although, of course, there'd be value to it.
So the problem that Bitcoin solved was having an ability to prevent copying in the digital world. And once it's solved that problem with the blockchain technology, now you can have a digital currency. So people have been theorizing about digital currencies forever because it'd just be way more efficient, a frictionless way to send value to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Christmas morning, you can send $1 billion to somebody if you wanted to. Bitcoin finally solved the problem of copy and pasting. Let's put it that way.
That's a great way to put it. All right, so show me a couple Bitcoin. I want people to understand what that currency looks like.
So we always get a kick out of this because whenever you see a story by the mainstream press who has really not any idea about what Bitcoin is, and I'm not faulting people for, but probably a lot of people watching us don't really understand what this is. But it's a pet peeve of mine because they always show in these little gold coins with a B on it, and so people think, well, what is that? Is it like little gold coins? No, it's an entirely digital thing. I carry it on my cell phone. You can put it on a computer, and we get. Just think of it like this. Here's a 30-second way to understand how this thing works, in terms of what we all understand. He said the Internet of Money. This is exactly, so if you understand, most of us by now have a pretty good idea of the Internet. I remember in the 90s people used to ask me, so this Internet company, who's the CEO of this company?
Right.
You know, and I'd be like, no, there is no CEO of the Internet. And so we all know that now, right? So that's kind of common knowledge. The second thing we all kind of have a feel for is what a currency is, right? We go to a different country, we switch our dollars out for whatever else. The third thing, and this is probably the most important for our purposes, it's also a payment system. You wrap all three of those things together, an Internet of Money, a currency, and a payment system, and now you understand what Bitcoin is. So the same way you send email, now you can send monetary value. And this is where it outflanks gold, because gold is useful. A lot of people think you should go back to a gold standard, and that'd be really kind of cool. The problem is that if you want to have a peer-to-peer transaction, you're limited to an arm's length transaction, right? I can give Justin some gold. But what Bitcoin allows me to do is to do business.
If dollars were limited to gold, you could give them that receipt, and that would be the same. But we can never trust government not to inflate the currency.
I can send significant amounts of money halfway around the world in a matter of seconds. And I can do that while keeping my privacy and the other party keeping their privacy, really reducing money back to a peer-to-peer transaction. And that's another thing, is that you can't do business at a distance in any way today without involving an intermediary who very often is a dishonest participant.
It's a bank, it's a Federal Reserve, it's a central bank someplace. All right, we're going a little over, but let me ask this final question. When I give you $1, it has a full backing of the United States. It's right there on the linen. Back when it was connected to a currency, it was here's a $5 note, and a $5 note was worth an ounce of silver. You could go down to the Federal Reserve, and they would literally give you a silver coin for it. But when I give you a Bitcoin, it's not attached to anything. Therefore, it's not worth anything. We're spending all this money. It's $2,700 for a Bitcoin. That's backed up by nothing.
Right, and the current fiat currency that we're all have in our wallets is also backed by nothing.
The full faith and credit of the United States.
Well, we'll see how it's going to go bankrupt. First of all, so here's what I would say. The value of Bitcoin is in its technology. It is giving people the ability to send each other value, like he said, on Christmas morning. There's no intermediary. It's peer-to-peer. And secondly, there's law behind Bitcoin. You cannot overcome the code that has been written already. So it's like a computer program that can only be overwritten by a consensus of computers.
Right.
So no one person can override the code.
When you got me hooked into this at first, that was the point I could not wrap my mind on. I didn't believe it. There's no way it could be unhackable, to say it. But because this is diffused by a community of individual computers, and those computers have to agree on something, it makes it impossible to corrupt it. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody who's holding their Bitcoin at some exchange, that exchange can't get robbed like a bank gets robbed, but the actual coin itself isn't going to go away. All right, people want to get some more information. Where's the best place for somebody to get the kind of 101 level on Bitcoin?
You know, 101 is kind of tough. We talk about this being kind of a rabbit hole, so prepare yourself because you're gonna really get into this. But I like CoinDesk.com is one of my favorite sites that I like to look at. But really, just do a search on it and see what you bump into. You know, actually, the really good place to go is on YouTube.
YouTube, I couldn't agree more. Bob, thank you. Justin, thank you. Stay tuned.